Travel the smaller roads of Louisiana, you'll witness the landmarks disappearing. Feelings of loss when an old store closes are rooted in more than the physical. In peeling paint and crumbling brick, we see the possibility that no one will remember the small details that made a town and perhaps influenced our character. That's why we thought it might be valuable to recall in this program some intangible remnants, not just the buildings, but some of the building blocks of who we are. Because there is also a lost Louisiana in the way we were. Dusk in Baton Rouge, and the USS Kidd stands above the low waters of the Mississippi River. This lean destroyer was once hit by a Japanese fighter plane in a kamikaze attack. Now it's a tourist attraction. The men walking through the cramped crew quarters this evening, though, are no ordinary tourists. Like a lot of veterans who visit these old ships, retired Rear Admiral Frank Collins could find his way down her steel decks and through her low portals in the dark.
It brings back wonderful memories to me, to tell you the truth. You know, one of the advantages that I had over so many sailors and officers was the fact that I'm short. The Lord built me short, and as a result, I could get around ships of this size without much problem. Bumped my head many times, but it was a fantastic experience, really.
For Admiral Collins and friends, it's no ordinary weekend. These former seamen, along with their Air Force and Army buddies, have come home to the Old War Skule. At a USO-style dance, kicking it all off, the men find they may have served thousands of miles and even wars apart, but their common bond is LSU. The school decided Veterans Day had for too long been celebrated without the most important part. So this year, all sorts of ranks and all the flag officers who were once ranked cadets at LSU were invited back for a grand Veterans Day ceremony on the parade grounds where they once stood in rigid formation. Air Force Brigadier General Wilbur Joffrion can speak for any of these men and a few women. This feels like home.
And they're having a ball. I mean, you know, I think it carries them back to the old days.
It's the professional cradle of so many veterans and currently serving military men and women because of an old tradition here. The sheer numbers of graduates LSU has sent to war is phenomenal. As many officers as West Point or Annapolis. Gather that extraordinary number of decorated heroes together and you'll get quite an earful of stories. Oh, yeah. More than that, the spirit, a nearly ancient spirit of deeply rooted military tradition, is in the autumn air. As Gulf War veterans like Lieutenant General Thomas Rame casually chats with Robert Badon. Rame led the first attack to penetrate Iraqi positions in Desert Storm. Badon served in World War I.
You don't imagine how green I was. It was unbelievable. Everything was so new, so big. For instance, there are more PhDs on the faculty now than there were students at that time. And it was a very small school. It was on the old campus out where the state capitol is now.
Robert Badon is one of only 5 surviving cadets of the Old War Skule, spelled S-K-U-L-E. It began so long ago. He remembers when LSU dorm rooms were in the old Pentagon barracks.
Well, it's kind of slow. It was strict military. We were as strict as West Point, and we were punished by giving demerits, and each demerit had to be worked out around the flagpole, and it was strict, very strict military. Yeah.
You had to march around the flagpole?
We're marching around, and for each demerit, you walked 45 minutes around the flagpole with your rifle, but if you didn't want to carry a rifle, you had to walk for another 15 minutes.
What a collection of living history this day became. History beginning in what seems to us another world entirely. The Louisiana Seminary of Learning and Military Academy opened in 1860 near Pineville. At the time, Colonel William Tecumseh Sherman was superintendent. Baton Rouge historian Billy Spadell.
After the firing on Fort Sumter, when Louisiana seceded from the Union, Sherman wasted no time in resigning from the college and resuming his military career in the United States Army.
The Civil War emptied the school as cadets left to join the Confederate Army. The building did not survive a fire, but the school did. Its traditions weathered several relocations. From the earliest days, the school was obviously a military academy and not exactly of the first order.
The seminary had opened just months before the outbreak of the Civil War, and life in those times were not very easy, and Sherman, being a military man, was a strict and rigid disciplinarian, and at first he was not very popular with most of the students. But the parents loved him, especially those who had unruly, quarrelsome sons. Sherman had no qualms and didn't hesitate to expel cadets for infractions. He said he refused to be governed by cast-off boys of affluent planters. But Sherman wasn't all work and no play. He soon learned to love the young people and gave frequent dances and parties for the cadets. There wasn't a dry eye among the faculty and cadets when Sherman departed for the war. By October 1865, when the war had ended, David French Boyd succeeded in reopening the seminary, which was still in Pineville, and he acted as the second superintendent. And for a while, the campus was utilized by federal troops as a hospital following the disastrous Red River campaign. And Boyd found the place in deplorable condition, nearly everything destroyed or stolen. But due to the courage and determination of Boyd and a small group of dedicated educators who not only kept the institution alive during those dark days of Reconstruction, but also laid the foundation for future LSU as we know it today.
Cadets who made the most of their training went on to command men in every conflict since. LSU-trained colonels commanded the volunteer regiments this state raised for duty in Cuba in 1898. A future governor, Ruffin Pleasant, led a battalion there. In World War I, John Archer Lejeune, who served under General John Pershing, was the first Marine officer to command a combat division. Look through the old Gumbo yearbook sometime, and you'll get just a taste of how steeped this school had become in military style. For their first 2 years, men had to be cadets. To fight in World War II, LSU produced as many officers as the official training schools at West Point and the U.S. Naval Academy. 15 alums reached the rank of general, including Lightning Joe Lawton Collins, commander of the 7th Army Corps in Europe, and later President Harry Truman's chief of staff. Claire Chennault, the fightingest flying tiger, and commander of the 14th Air Force in China. Graves Erskine headed one of the 3 main Marine divisions to capture Iwo Jima. The War School's president, Troy Middleton, was a pivotal tactician at the Battle of the Bulge. Life for the cadets, even during wartime, included the usual hijinks of that era. Joe Dale was a cadet here before the Second World War.
The hazing, of course, in 1938 was one that I'll not forget, because every freshman that came in ROTC in particular, his head was shaved immediately. Then you had to buy a cap. It was a purple cap with a little visor on it, and every freshman was called a dog. And you inscribed on the visor of the cap your name, Dog Dale, as an example. And you wore that cap to class and to everywhere else you went, except when you were in military uniform. The hazing that existed within the ROTC elements, it may have existed elsewhere on the campus in fraternities and sororities, I don't know, but the hazing we went through was recognized by the officials of the university, but it was pretty tough. Some of them I can't describe to you right now, but for example, I remember one upperclassman of mine, Slim Dixon, we call him, from Denham Springs. And we had to learn certain rules of the cadet corps. And he tested me, and I missed one. He said, "Lean over, Dog Dale," and I leaned over, and he took a broom and swatted me on my derriere, and I ended up in the hallway in the barracks in the stadium. So, but I still remember that whack today.
Do you remember the rule that you didn't remember then?
No.
Okay.
That was
work too well, did it?
That was 100 years ago, Jeff.
Through the many years, cadets have endured many unofficial rites of passage. Brigadier General Arthur Abercrombie.
As soon as you walked on campus, you had to go to the ROTC parade ground. They put you in a formation. If you didn't have your head shaved, they did it for you. And then you couldn't get a date for about 6 months. And they made you wear pajamas to the first football game. And none of the girls would go with you that way either. So what it did is it allowed the upperclassmen to get all the girls.
Our culture and our times help pick our heroes. And by the 1960s, the times led some of us to believe these men were not heroes. Mandatory ROTC at LSU was repealed. Randy Gurry was student body president in those times.
You have a company of 100 men and only 90 of them, only 10 of them want to be out there, and you've got 90 who don't want to be. 90 who are not polishing their shoes, they're not polishing their brass, they're not getting a haircut, they're not worried about their gig line, they don't care about their M16, they don't care about anything else. They don't want to be there, and so consequently the 90 that do not want to be there, we're making it very difficult for the 10 who did want to be there.
Just after mandatory ROTC fell, Colonel Joe Dale came back to LSU as commander of cadets. The number of cadets had plummeted. Actually, it had been falling for years. But Dale says there was and is something special about the program here.
The discipline that is instilled in the individual, not necessarily pure military discipline, but the discipline of living, of being able to apply your basic principles of study. You say, I can pass it off and go watch the TV tonight. We didn't have TVs then. We had radios. But we were all disciplined to turn the radio off and go to our study halls or do our studying. So I think discipline was there then, and it still exists.
The vets and today's cadets were recognized on that Saturday evening in this Coliseum of LSU's better-known heroes. They stood on the 50-yard line for a crowd that may remember Billy Cannon better than Blackjack Pershing. But that is our culture. Yet for a special moment, they were recognized as the eldest, the bravest, the strategist, the commanders, the original fighting tigers, who helped change a whole lot more than a digit on a scoreboard. They helped America change the world. From this school, some 12,000 young men just like these served in World War II. Some 500 died in combat. There are few physical reminders of the Old War Skule, but there are plenty of stories, and still a few storytellers. The tiny military academy established in 1860 is long gone, and time has eroded even some deep traditions. But that military foundation remains a part of our state's culture and should be remembered as more than just a part of our collective past. "9:30 on a Tuesday night, and Dan Hill is still tinkling smooth show tunes on an upright piano. For late diners at the Hotel Bentley, this is a haven. Every night, civility. That's how it is, and that's how it has always been. At a grand hotel like the Bentley. 90 years old and still the heart of downtown Alexandria. When the morning comes, guests may stroll to the streets, but if they don't have pressing business, they'll probably return to sit in the lobby. There's not much left here but the Bentley. Like every American city, Alexandria's downtown is a shell of its former bustle. The old family shops moved to the mall. The Bentley, thank heavens, is still here. Alvin Mykoff had a downtown shoe store across the street. Now he fits kids' feet. Guess where?
I honestly never believed that all of that traffic, interest, business would ever leave 3rd Street. I just never thought so. It was just too much. I said, believe me, if enough stores stay downtown, it'll stay. The hotel was still open in the 70s, and it would never, I think it was, And it would never, I didn't see it's possible for that much business to leave. That's how busy it was.
Then came the four-letter word.
Mall.
Joe D. Smith is publisher of the Alexandria Daily Town Talk.
Banking, retail, the Hotel Bentley. There were other hotels too, the Rapides Hotel, the Evangeline Hotel, but the Bentley Hotel was the place around which all downtown evolved.
I heard the story of why it was built. Mr. Joe Bentley took his dog into the Rapides Hotel, which was the hotel at the time, and they wouldn't let him in. And his boots were dirty because he had been out in his farmland and his big timber man. And they insulted him. He said, "I'll build a hotel to put you out of business." And he built the showplace of the South. There was nothing like this hotel in the South.
If it's true the founder was turned away for muddy boots, Joe Bentley would be proud today. Unlike overprotective modern hotels, you can still open the windows of your room at the Bentley. Since 1908, it has been a downtown anchor. Picture Alexandria then. A railroad, a few stores, lots of horse carts and clouds of red dust kicked up by all the hooves. A farm town, a frontier town? No, past that. Already a brawny town with hotels and fine homes, timber money and trade. The steam train pulled in on time. The newspaper carried ads for a soft drink just beginning to sweep the country. Joe Bentley and his partners built a hotel, all right, one to rival even the fanciest in New Orleans. The Bentley was it, where a man could get a shave and a haircut at the hotel barbershop, where the town fathers could meet in their peculiar manly luncheon fraternities. It had its own factory for making ice, its own wine cellar, and of course its own huge kitchen. The Bentley had a private printing office to compose menus for patrons who frequented the fancy dining rooms. When the Bentley opened, it even had its own artesian well for water. Pat Rabelais collects stories about those 90 grand years.
I understand at one time Mr. Bentley entertained his very, very good friends, and you had to be a very good friend or business associate of Joe Bentley to be invited to one of his food functions. So whoever was invited considered a high honor to have dined with Mr. Bentley.
Fancy it was for Alexandria, and fancy it still is. The ladies posted cards from a genteel writing room. When they pulled up, even if they were traveling alone, the Bentley extended the appropriate courtesies.
Even when society sort of frowned on a lady being alone in the evening, there was always safety and a warm welcome in this kind of a hotel, where management looked after people, and where there were courtesies and social rules that made for a far more pleasant life than some of that which we experience today.
A social aesthetic that we've probably forgotten.
Yes, and people dressed because if you were going to be seen in this kind of a surrounding, it seemed to be appropriate to be dressed and attired properly.
Just before World War II, central Louisiana became the troop training area for a 9-state region, 500,000 men. Add to that number all the families visiting them.
In Alexandria at that time, I believe, was 12,000 or 14,000 people. So it was a madhouse. But they had the maneuvers. As a youngster, we used to go up on the levee and talk to all the soldiers and watch them do all their deal. They had the Red Army and the Blue Army fighting each other, maneuvers.
It was the most vital, bustling place you would ever want to be.
It must have looked like Bourbon Street.
Oh, it did. It did, indeed. My first memory directly of the hotel was when people would come from out of town. This was a favorite meeting place where you'd meet relatives or meet friends. There were always groups gathered throughout the lobby. And this lobby, which has been so painstakingly restored, was really magnificent for a town this size. Some people say it was patterned a little after the old St. Charles Hotel in New Orleans. And the lobbies were very, very similar. Of course, the old St. Charles was torn down. But this one is still here.
Deco renovations from the 1930s dominate the lounge.
So prior to that, it was known as the Rathskeller, and I think that's indicative of the stained glass windows that we have here, which depict native costumes with the gentlemen using their language to say cheers. During the war years, when the Louisiana maneuvers were on, Dr. Humphrey Hardy, who was a local retired doctor, had the occasion to visit with several of the prominent captains and lieutenants, then Eisenhower and Bradley, to name a couple of them. They were never all here at one time, and he tells me that he is almost convinced that a lot of the strategy of World War II was done behind this column on old napkins. And what a prize that would be if someone still had those napkins.
The Bentley had closed twice for lack of business. In 1985, it was a mess. Silver had been sold off, marble removed, but most of it is refurbished now, and most of its warmth survives. Every so often, maybe just enough to fan some hope, you come across a Bentley, not only still standing, but still waiting to embrace you in grandeur. Joyce and Pete Scallon still come to the lobby of the Bentley from time to time.
During those days, you come to the Hotel Bentley, well, you was flying high. I mean, it was a nice place, and
anytime ladies went anywhere, it was hats and gloves. You know, you weren't dressed unless you had a nice hat and wore gloves.
Did people act differently?
Yes, I think they were a little bit more subdued than today's crowd.
When it snowed in Alexandria in 1923, guests woke to a white courthouse lawn. That courthouse across the street was once a lovely sight. What happened to the loveliness, Alexandria? Concrete blocks, someone thought, would be lovelier than a cupola. Salute to the still living Bentley, an oasis of enduring charm in one of too many barren downtowns. They're building a new civic center across the street now. It's sure to help business. And that's good, because the endurance of the Hotel Bentley is a rare reminder that we haven't entirely abandoned our senses. Lost Louisiana will continue. Fading old landmarks represent something intangible, the forgotten energy of other decades, of other lives. The big bands used to play in the Venetian room of Alexandria's Hotel Bentley in the 40s and 50s. Anyone old enough to remember or lucky enough to have heard them must regret there are no more big bands crisscrossing the country. Surprise, we found one. They've driven across several state lines to be here. They're ready to unload the bus. It's a late Saturday afternoon in mid-December, and band leader Jack Morgan is about to encounter an inconvenience.
Oops. Locked. Oh, well. That's par for the course. We have that quite a bit. Hurry up and wait. It's the name of the game.
This is the bus, and this is the story of an extraordinary band that travels the nation as no one else does anymore.
I'm 54 years old, and I've been doing this since 1958 myself. I know I don't look it.
Drummer Eddie Julian.
Been doing it with Jack for 23 years. December 21st, I'll start my 24th year.
Sometimes you feel like a 70-mile-an-hour sardine, but generally we have a great bunch of guys, and that helps things a bit.
This is Harold Meeker. He lives in Las Vegas, Nevada, but back, how many years ago did you join? What year was that?
78.
78.
Give me a typical day. Tell me something.
A typical day, we might get up at 7, 8 o'clock. It just depends on how far we have to go, but mostly we do one-nighters across the country.
The latest and every engagement for the Jack Morgan Orchestra includes unloading their own equipment, every bit of it, carrying their own instruments and setting up their own stage.
And I was going to say it beat loading boxcars.
Tonight it's the American Legion Hall in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, for one of the last big bands, still traveling the road and stopping in towns conveniently close to their fans. These are their fans. The thousands of music lovers who remember a golden age of swing and wah-wah, and as another band leader put it, that sweet music for dancing and dreaming.
We're like his daddy's wah-wah.
Now, when you hear Schubert's Serenade.
Oh, it brings back wonderful memories of Russ Morgan's orchestra. And Jack is so much like him. He looks like him. He has the same library, all the repertoire that he plays. Yes, it's a big thrill to get to come to hear him.
If you're a dancer, you don't need any description.
It has a lot of feeling. It makes you want to enjoy the dancing to it because of the feeling of the music.
Every person here tonight knows the first note from Jack Morgan's trombone will be the lead-in to a song his father wrote. It's called, Does Your Heart Beat for Me? This is the music of romance for any age. The cavernous Veterans Hall melts away and a starlit ballroom entreats pairs of shuffling feet to the light fantastic.
The band, of course, is marvelous. It's full. It's a large band. I love the trombone, something we don't get to hear anymore with all these little combos around. To dance to a full orchestra is a big thrill.
The quality of the music and the dancing with the partner. You don't throw the beautiful lady out and draw her back. Or you don't go dancing off in the other direction with the lady and meet once in a while. We prefer this type of music, this type of dancing, and the type of people we have.
They live for it, you know, and it's great to know that you're out here giving people a great deal of pleasure and you're making them happy. That does make a difference. The playing is what makes it all worthwhile.
Oh, it's nostalgic to me, yes, but had I never even heard Russ or his music, this is wonderful.
They are fans of more than the music. They are devoted to a gentle camaraderie we in the colder world may call old-fashioned, even corny. In an age of anything goes, the Big Timers Club, meeting here tonight, requires formal attire. In an era of hurried living, they make the time for this one whole night of nearly bygone gentility.
All right, we're about to enter the Morgan Room.
Among the many fans, one stands out. V.O. Mitchell has devoted a room in his house to the Morgan Band.
This is the room in my home that's devoted to the Russ Morgan Orchestra, Russ Morgan himself, and son Jack, who now heads the orchestra.
You have posters and tapes, hundreds of tapes, obviously albums, pictures. How long have you been collecting all this?
It'll go back to 1941, 42, in that range.
But Jack Morgan, the trombonist and band leader, just isn't that old. V.O. Mitchell has been following the band since it was the Russ Morgan Orchestra, begun in 1935 by Jack's father.
And Russ was the leader, and believe it or not, it was financed by Rudy Valley. Most people won't believe that because Valley was noted as being kind of close with the money. Talent, unbelievable. The guy was an arranger, composer. He played at least 5 instruments, including the piano and the organ, and the trombone, naturally. And had been an arranger, for example, for John Philip Sousa.
What is special about the way that Russ and Jack both played the trombone?
Well, I've heard Jack say something that is the best way to describe it. He said, Dad could do things with a trombone that can't be done on a trombone. And he said, I've tried to copy that. And he has. He's a clone, really, of Russ. He's identical on the trombone. And even his vocals, I find many times hard to distinguish between the two voices.
Another night, another stop for the Morgan Band. The small town of Clinton is on their agenda every year. This despite a hectic schedule.
I went home back at the Quad Cities in Illinois for a week, and that's the only week. From January 4th to January 12th was the only week that I have even been home since last September, and I don't get home now until April 10th.
The band plays Clinton every year because it's like coming home to family. A network of friends keeps their spirits up. Legions of fans appear again and again. Renee and Nell Gay could think of no better way to spend their 43rd wedding anniversary than in this warm lodge with this warm music.
When we go to a dance, she wears me out. I'm getting kind of old for this, you know. But we manage to get through it most of the time.
Break out a sweat. Not perspire, just sweat. Especially when I have good music and we dance every dance.
Dance every day?
Every dance. Every dance.
She wears me out.
Happy anniversary, Renee and Nell. And happy anniversary to the Morgan Band. Tonight, it is 60 years old. Still touring, still swinging, still bringing a beautiful sound to dance halls across the land. It's been a long time since the swing bands were in full swing. Along came television, and we began staying at home. Yet even in that, we in Louisiana should cherish some legends who help nurture our collective character.
Feel like a story this morning? Okay. Let's see. Oh, I remember one I've been wanting to tell you.
Once upon a time, there were some pioneers, not the kind who settled the West. They were the kind who settled little children down after breakfast. They came to visit all of us lucky enough to have a television and played games and sang songs that taught us about manners and starting each day with a smile. There used to be a lot of kindly grown-ups on TV who thought it was important kids had a friend. Some of them even became famous for being so very nice.
Won't you please, please won't you be my neighbor?
Across America, Fred Rogers and Captain Kangaroo were childhood friends, but across Louisiana, our TV friends were different. They lived in our hometowns.
Now we have once again this year the biggest singing talent in these parts, Miss Iris Reed. That's enough, Iris.
Captain Tall Tower, did anyone notice he was the same guy as Papa John? Well, Papa John is, more or less, better known today as Henry Clements.
The first character would have been 1959, and that's when I did Commodore Clem. I had gone to work at KALB in Ellick, and if this gets to the air, hello to all you folks down in Ellick and Mr. Bushytail and all those folks. They said that I should be an old sea captain, and I should be called Commodore Clem, and I adapted a character that I had done in summer stock at Maxinkuckee, Indiana. I was the Eddie Mayhoff character in Visit to a Small Planet. So it was a simple matter of doing the voice and a little characterization and putting on the costume, and I was Commodore Clem.
And you were crotchety,
and nobody
right?
would recognize me when I went to the grocery store.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's one of the most important things.
Do you remember him now, Alexandria? Do you remember he once took us on a wild ride in a fast sports car? Do we remember him for tall tales, or do we remember him in hindsight as firecrackers of fun in the ancient days of Louisiana TV?
We got to thinking that maybe we'd like to show you that even youngsters can really play musical instruments, and they can play them well. For example,
Shreveport kids had Bob and his buddies, an innocent romp into silliness that lasted for years. Bob Griffin.
I went out and bought a rabbit, went out and bought a hamster with a hamster cage, and then we needed somebody for me to talk to. And since it was just me, we didn't know what, so we decided to wear a straw hat, and under the straw hat, we'd put Orville the alligator, 5 7/8 inches long. Orville is the smartest most sarcastic guy that you've ever met in the world. He knows everything, anything. If there's a question, Orville knows the answer. Griffin is a dummy. Orville runs the show. So we needed the alligator to talk to us, and we had an engineer, Jim Wama, smart guy, and he said, I'll tell you what, let me play with it. So I used to do commercials, and I did a Pack-a-Sack commercial. And so they took one of my Pack-a-Sack commercials, reversed it, and speeded it up. Like that. And then Jim would sit in the control room and he would talk with me with that voice coming out from under my hat. And I'd say, Orville, how are you doing this? No, you're doing pretty good. And he'd change the volume and rise the volume up and somewhere or other even change the speed on it to where I could talk to the alligator. And we talked every morning.
They were silly, weren't they, kids? And contrived, but who cared? They were as real as any friend and sometimes a lot more dependable. They were on every day. They were on live. Children's shows were not all games. Romper Room began long before Sesame Street. Baton Rouge grown-ups remember Miss Pat Evans.
We gave both children and their parents the kind of information that they needed to do, and we made it accessible to any child who was watching, and also to try to involve them so it was participatory. We paid a lot of attention to that, so they weren't just passive watchers of a television screen, but the activities were so that they could participate. And we were blessed with some very, very gifted people. Even the person who played the music for Romper Room was an accomplished musician, an accomplished pianist, and could just pick up on any nuance of what was happening, which showed respect for the children.
We didn't know it, of course, but sitting there, probably too close to the set, we learned a lot more than we might realize today, combining gentle education in manners and wonderment with a good dose of adventure. The guy with the fringe is, frankly, better known as Buckskin Bill than Bill Black.
Hello again. Welcome to part 2 of the Storyland Cabin, right here. My name is Buckskin Bill. Well, you know what we're going to do in the first part of the second half of Storyland today? Well, I told you. Can you remember what it was going to be? Were we going to sing a song? Were we going to draw a picture? Were we going to play with a modeling dough? That's right. Come on, let's move our Indian blanket off. And away we go with the modeling dough.
Buckskin came to visit kids for 30 years. 30 years of live television and being so gosh darn chipper. Ask anyone from Baton Rouge over the age of 15 if they know this song.
What is the piece of music?
It is called The Spirit of Freedom March. It was written by a beautiful man. I'm glad you asked. His name was Kent Cooper. Kent Cooper was head of a United Press International office, and as an avocation, he wrote band music. And there was a man named Paul Laval who had a weekly radio show on one of the networks called Paul Laval's City Service Band of America. City Service sponsored him. And Kent Cooper wrote pieces of music, and Paul Laval played them.
Bob Griffin still does TV every day as sports director at KSLA. Henry Clements has his own high-quality TV production company. Bill Black never stopped educating kids. He retired the Buckskin just a few years ago and is now on the school board. Pat Evans went on to produce documentaries on television and today is a public policy consultant. We want to thank them all, even 30 years later. It was a time when kids' shows were done for the kids. Sure, some of the hokey hosts pitched bread or cereal, and sure, a lot of parents back then must have wondered why their kids threw such fits for carbonated fun, whatever that was. But our rosy hindsight can't be entirely nostalgic. There was something different about Louisiana Kids Host.
In person, this is Buckskin Bill saying you're never completely dressed until you put on a smile.
These folks were, after all, our heroes and our friends.
Keep the good memories close. There may not be many physical reminders of our fading culture left, but knowledge of ourselves and a faith in who we are in Louisiana can never crumble.